Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. Shortly, Isaac Murdoch will be joining us. So there will be, Isaac will be popping in shortly. But in the meantime, I just want to remind everyone here that we will be doing providing some opportunity to ask questions, and you can find the form to ask your question in the description box down below. And there's a link there that you can access, so you can put your questions forward and I will moderate those after we hear from Kanahus, who's going to be sharing with us her experiences on the land, the relationship between Indigenous peoples and the Canadian government, and of course, with everyone listening here, providing some lived experience that you probably don't get to hear, definitely not through mainstream media. And it's an important voice that you hear from, and also to be thinking about what is going to be your call to action. As we are in Treaties Recognition Week here in Ontario, part of this learning is also asking the question, what are we going to do about this? So always thinking about our actions and what we can do to address the ongoing violence and injustices that are happening every day on these lands. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Kanahus, to introduce yourself, and whenever Isaac pops in, he will pop in.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Kanahus Manuel, and I'm from the Secwepemc and the Kanahus Nations in so-called British Columbia, Canada. When you think about so-called British Columbia, you think of the mountains with the snow caps, and that's where I live. I come from an area called Secwepemc is our territory, and it's 180,000 square kilometers of land. We call our land Secwepemc, and it refers to the spilling waters because we have so much lakes. And in fact, we come from the only inland temperate rainforest in the world because of the magnitude of all of our lakes and the snow and the glaciers that continue to melt on a daily basis and fill all of our creeks and rivers and streams all the way to the ocean. It's actually what gives life to all of the salmon and the salmon spawning grounds. My grandfather's name is Dr. Grand Chief George Manuel. They just published a Canada Post stamp of him. If you go to the post office and want to send somebody some mail, you could actually go and purchase a Canada Post stamp with my grandfather's face on it. And they did that in honor and recognition of all of his work that he has done in Canada, fighting for the rights of our Secwepemc people and our Indigenous people of Canada and Indigenous people of the whole world, since he's founded a major organization called the World Council of Indigenous Peoples. My father's name is Arthur Manuel, and he wrote 2 books, and I encourage everyone to read these books. His name's Arthur Manuel, and his books are Reconciliation Manifesto and Unsettling Canada, which really goes into our history as Indigenous people and our current fight for our Indigenous rights and title today. I know Isaac is going to come on this call, and me and Isaac connected because of our love for the land, and we've noticed each other on social media because we're doing the same type of work. What is my connection to the land? It's in my blood. I say that the same, the blood and bones of my ancestors are in the soil that we walk on, and that's why we have to walk and tread very lightly on our soil, because it's made up of the blood and bones of generations upon generations and generations of my people that have lived and died in our territories. The land is very special to us because everything that we get from the land, we respect. One of the first ceremonies that we do when we have a baby and the baby is going to start to eat solid food, instead of feeding our baby the rice cereals and the baby foods that are in the supermarket, it's really important for our babies to taste our food. So the first foods they ever touch to their mouth after breast milk is salmon, deer, our traditional roots, spitlam, and our Saskatoon berry, which is the chief of all the berries because it gets the ripest, the fastest in the summer. So we let our babies taste that little bit of food, so they're imprinted and they get to taste that, and that's the very first food, so they're connected to that food. And so I do so much different things. I know you're from around the ages grade 9 to 12, and that's like a very important part of our lives as growing up. We're transitioning into adulthood, womanhood, and manhood. And so traditionally in our territories, we have ceremonies to help assist in these transitions from womanhood to girl to womanhood and from boys to manhood. In our territory, and what we've done and brought back for our daughters and my nieces. I am a mother of 4 and I have 4 children, and I have a 12-year-old, 16-year-old, 18-year-old, and 21-year-old. And when my young ones were transitioning into their womanhood and manhood, they went to the mountains to fast for 4 days and 4 nights alone. It's a part of their own ceremony for themselves and building strength and endurance and their connection to the spiritual part of our existence. My daughter and my niece, we put them out in the mountains for 1 month alone by themselves. And on the last 4 days, they fasted without food or water. And during that month, they weren't able to touch food. They had to build their own bush shelter out in the land and stay there. And I came to visit them once a day with a little portion of food, of our traditional food. Like throughout the day, I would bring them little portions of food, but our camp was far away. I had to walk and hike to them. So they were literally alone out there. And you can see what that gave, what type of education and schooling and enlightenment that gave to these young people that went out to do this for themselves. I'm not sure if we have Isaac on now, if he's there with us. But
I'm here.
The land is so crucial to who we are. Without the land, we have nothing. We can't live, anywhere else. We're not living on the moon. We're not living on any other planet. We're living here on this beautiful Mother Earth. And we have a belief that in order for us to live, we have to also give back to this earth. The earth gives us so much: our food, our clothing, our shelter, for us to be able to live. And in turn, we must give back to the earth. And for us, that means protecting her. That means defending her and doing whatever we can to keep her, beautiful and pristine and without toxic chemicals, without mining and pipelines that are really just going to destroy our land. And it's really your generation right now that's going to be stuck with the majority of the problems. It was the generations prior and my generation, that we're fighting against these industries, but you're stuck with it. You're the one that's going to be stuck with the impacts. And that's why it's very crucial to really think critical about what's happening in this world and figuring and using your brilliance as students to start to create change and help the planet. But I'm going to pass it on to Isaac since he's here now.
Ani bonjour. Mazanapkan ge go na be Indigenous. Gonna be guk shabiga jwaten donjaba. Gnojin do dem. Nishna be nini and dao. Nimki ajbikong ninda. Gitchin and dum. Ya ma piwi ganonen guk. Kanahus Manuel. I want to thank all of you for joining us, and of course Kanahus for being here with us as well. I think that what she was saying is so critically important, that when young people rise up and when young people have the ability to organize and strategically think together as a group, then real change can happen. And one of the things that I want to ask you, Kanahus, is as a mom, as an Indigenous woman, that of course you're a midwife, you've helped deliver babies, you're a water and land protector, you're just a really decent, good person all the way around that has done so much to uplift our culture and our traditions. As a mom, how do you feel? Like, what do you feel inside when you know that all of these mining companies and forestation that happens continue, the pipelines? Like, what do you feel inside?
I feel like some people might think like, oh, I feel like so disheartened that my children are going to have to be left with this. But for me, I have a fighting spirit that doesn't want to give up. I don't want to ever give up. So I put so much effort into like teaching my children, why it's important for us to stand up, why it's crucial that we're born with a voice to use it, to use this power and have the confidence. Because as an Indigenous youth, um, there's hardly any type of opportunities. I see the way that people look at my children compared to another group of children because they're Indigenous, because they're Native. They think, oh, they're up to something no good because there's 4 Indigenous youth standing there. No, we're training our children to empower themselves, to stand up and fight to protect what we have left. It's really what we have left because there's so much areas, and Isaac, there's so much areas of our territory where we wouldn't want to go live anymore because it's so toxic, because it's so contaminated, because we can't clean fish and clean deer. Like, where do we go? Like, we have to create these major spaces, these freedom liberated zones where we can continue to exist as Indigenous people. That's the only way. We have to have large tracts that are like the size of national parks where Indigenous people could live free without any type of interference from the outside or the colonial Canadian government. And as a mother, I want to have hope. I want to have just hope. I don't want to have, despair. Like I feel like we're going to lose everything. No, I have hope and I have faith that this next generation will be able to continue on this fight to protect our land, to protect our rights, to protect our earth. And it's going to be people like us that continue to teach, to continue to, put all of our work aside to bring these words and this teachings to the next generation. That's where it's going to be. It's the next generation. It's our children that are going to have some wins, I believe.
Absolutely. So I know we have a lot of things in common. One of them is that in our territories, we both had tailing ponds that where the dams broke, where a whole bunch of uh, you know, very poisonous toxic materials were released into our watersheds, and it devastated our lands. And this stuff is forever. This stuff just doesn't go away overnight. And so when you talked about how pollution and how industry reduces our traditional spaces, I really get that. I understand that. And I love the idea how you bring up where we need to have sanctuaries or we need to have land that's free for us to roam freely as Indigenous people. So we know that the Indian Act was created to, you know, force our people through colonization into residential schools, even into Western education systems, into programs and services economies, the whole deal. It was all to take us away from the land, from being a free people.
Mm.
And so when you talk about freedom, when we talk about freedom on the land, how does that look like for you?
Well, freedom on the land, like right now I'm building and I'm the start of a dream, which is a freedom village in Central America with the Indigenous peoples here. It's something I would like to envision there where we could have these freedom villages from around the world, international freedom villages connected to each other and be able to share and mobilize each other and each other's areas to help bring expertise and our skills from Canada down here and vice versa. But a freedom village would be, we can be self determining. We could be self-determining people. What does that mean to have self-determination as Indigenous people? We have a right to live where we want. We have a right to our own decision makers and the decisions that we want to make around our land. We have food. We want to have farm to table. We want to be able to grow our food or wild harvest and straight to our table, straight to feed our families. We don't want to have to go to the supermarket to have to buy our food. We saw what happened during COVID. You know, it was so hard to even get to the grocery store. People had to line up. Those times are just a warning for us because those times could come again. We need to be able to be self-sustaining with our food, with our medical, with our dentistry, with our, you know, our birthing, our practices, our own institutions, our own educational institutions. You know, we need to be teaching our own Indigenous governance, our own knowledge in our own institutions. Well, whether we call it an institution or not, but just to give you an idea, we need to have our own economy. You know, we really need to have our own economy because this economy that we're basing off right now was invented, you know, it was invented, man-made economy invented, you know, and it's destroying our planet because it's based on this capitalist, you know, imperialist model where they have went to go take over land around the world, to take all the resources from other people's land into this European global market. And that's not what we want. We had economy. Like people say, why you talk about economy? Like, no, we had economy before. My family would say Indigenous women were the most fiercest economists. You know, they would know how much fish we needed for the lost our village for the winter. They knew how much berries. They knew how much, you know, buffalo. They knew exactly what we needed for our economic well-being. And so there's other ways to look at economy rather than what we are living in under today. And you can see it when you go to some like more isolated Indigenous community where there's no dollars getting passed around. It's just like, I got some fish and here's some moose meat. Or like I was staying in some Indigenous communities in northern BC where they were every day, some kid was running over with, oh, here's some beaver meat. Oh, you have some beaver meat. Okay, here's some bear grease. And send that kid back with something else. Here's 7 salmon. And then, oh, okay, you sending 7 salmon. Okay, what do I have to send back with this? And there was no cash ever moved around, you know, it was just our trade, our traditional Indigenous economies and trade that I really believe we can base economy off of because we never destroyed the planet with our economy. Our Indigenous economies actually made the earth a better place because we looked after our huckleberries. We looked after our salmon because we knew that was a part of our economy. We looked after our buffalo, our moose meat, make sure the grounds were good and everything. That was everything to us. So, you know, we really need to start to use this, our mind, to not be stuck in the same model that Western colonization, imperialist countries invented for us to be living under right now. Why I'm speaking English today, even, you know, like, so we as creative people and artists, you know, like there's probably so much artists out there. I say that all these students are artists in some way, you know, in this way to be able to create and dream and envision something. I think that we can create a new world that's not based on this destructive model that destroys our planet. And we're smart enough. It's only been what, Canada's 155 or so years old now. It's a baby. It's a baby country, you know, so
it's a baby.
Yeah.
So I really like where you're going with this. So I know that, you know, the last burden of corporations and major governments all over the world is the globalization of Western education. They know that that's how they trap societies and large groups of people into, you know, all of these things of capitalism and, you know, the economics that just tunnel people into, you know, consumerism that just extracts. And we're educated through those education systems, Western education systems, to participate in that. And there's almost like there's this idea that if you're really successful, then you have lots of money, you participate in these economies, and you get mortgages, you get kind of trapped into this idea that that's what success is. And so that's what people try to achieve. And the other kind of economy that you were talking about, where it's like you're giving to the earth and the earth is getting healthier and things are getting stronger and it's from the land to table. and all of that stuff, which has proven, it has a proven track record for forever that that's what works. And not just for Indigenous people, but for everybody all over the whole entire frickin' earth. Like that's what works. And so this other colonial experiment that just keeps going on has proven to be such a detriment to the environment. And we're suffering a massive ecological collapse. We're in climate change. They're trying to extract oil continually, and they're driving it through Indigenous territories. And so the question I have is, let's talk about the education system. Because if we want to have a society that is able to change and be free thinking, I believe that the education system is what produces those types of people. And so our systems of education need to change. So, for example, when I was younger, I was a bit of a freedom baby. And so I never really went to school, so I never got indoctrinated as much. You know what I mean? So I was able to think freely. And I learned my Kinamage when my education came from the land and the elders. And I find today that that's a very valuable type of education, but it's also a higher learning of education, because our Indigenous people and people all over the world that had those types of economies and those disciplines of education understood that living with the earth in harmony was the only way that we could survive. And it was the only way that our kids could survive. And right now, contemporary education systems are not teaching our kids that. And so if we want to produce a type of people that are like that, we need to educate them like that. So what would you say to teachers and educators out there that are, working 9 to 5, they're in the system, but they know they want change, they know things aren't right, but they're stuck and they don't know how to get out of it. And the system is so big and so large and has so many moving parts and has a hierarchy. What would you say to the teachers?
Well, first of all, I know that they're forced to teach this curriculum. And a lot of times what I'm learning is this curriculum is developed by industry. So it's not even teachers coming together to really form this curriculum. It's other people that are out there. So these good-hearted teachers that really want to teach good and really enlighten the students are forced to teach other curriculum. And I just, from even my understanding of public school system and this Western school system, because I was forced to go into this public school system as well. And so, yeah, I was indoctrinated by them, but I went home every day to get re-indoctrinated back by my father, who is an Indigenous freedom fighter and Indigenous rights fighter and an actual lawyer who was, went to law school so we could combat the Canadian, legal system. And so for the teachers, I really say, like, we had to form our own curriculum. We had to form our own curriculum for our own children that we were teaching, because when we wanted to send them even into the immersion school system, after a certain grade, then they start learning English again. And it was like, back into this indoctrination with this colonial curriculum, learning about European history and Canadian history, European American history even and stuff. But we really need to stand up as educators and really form our own, I believe, re-indigenize some institutions and the way that we want to teach our kids. Because I think you talk to a lot of teachers and Indigenous teachers out there, they're going to say everything is land-based. We can't teach in a classroom setting with desks and tables and chairs and paper and pen. That's not the way Indigenous students learn. We learn on the land. We learn by experience and actually practicing and doing it. And we wanted to, gift our children with the education when they graduate to build their own home. They don't have to go and work 9 to 5 for their whole life to get a mortgage and pay a mortgage off. And finally they're retired and they're all old and they can't even enjoy their youthfulness and their life. So that's the type of system that is put in place, because they're looking for people who can fill the wage earner economy. That's what they're trying to look for by teaching in the school system now. So how can teachers be enlightened to, bring the kids onto the land and to, force new curriculum, not this outdated curriculum from 50, 60 years ago, the same things that our parents were learning. We're not enlightening ourselves with new teachings, new curriculum, with the change that's happening in this world.
Absolutely. I really believe that's true. I often say that, if we want change to happen, we need to educate our children to be that change. And so I guess my next question is, a lot of young people, they feel inferior to the system oftentimes. But I also know that there's nothing more powerful than when young people join together in unity. They can stop like armies, and that they're so powerful, and that young energy can be so strong that it can change everything. And so I guess my next question is, we know that in order for young people to survive climate change in the future, we have to educate them differently. We have to give them skills that are going to accommodate the climate, the environment, but also the social constructs that are in place. And that's, of course, we're talking big change, but the world needs it right now. And so what would your message be to young people about, taking their future in their hands? Because I remember when I was young, I remember one time saying to this teacher, I said, you know what? I said, I don't want to be here anymore because I want to go to my school is in a sweat lodge in our ceremonies. I said, that's where I learn all my stuff. And that teacher said, that ain't going to get you nowhere. And you're just going to be a bum. That's what he told me. You're going to be a bum. You're not going to know nothing. But that's not true. And so with Indigenous knowledge system or earth knowledge, I've had a very beautiful life. I've been all over the world. I've experienced the most beautiful people and places. And I've had such an exciting life. And like you said, I was able to build my own home. I was able to, have a fairly accurate, sustainable economy amongst my people in my village. And everything that you're saying is so true. So what advice do we give to young people? Because they have the real power. It's not the governments, it's not the corporations, it's the young people that have like full control of what's going on. And what advice would you give to them to take that control and to rise up, because the future is theirs and we know that. And you know but to be a conformist is not going to change anything, but to trailblaze like what you do, you're leaving a path for them. So what advice do you have for young people to rise up? And I mean like really rise up.
I say all of young people need to find, in their heart and in their spirit, because, I know whatever colors your skin is, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of childhood trauma, there's a lot of broken households and separated families, and so much that our young people go through. And we have to really have the power to be able to love ourselves, to heal ourselves with the power of your youthfulness and find that strength. Because no matter all the hardships that I went in my life and all the tears that I shed when I was a teenager, and all the heartbreak and everything that we go through as young people, all these hormonal changes are making our emotions go off the scale, off the roof and everything. But all of that, we have the power. And it was when, I saw young people, 15 years old, 16-year-old, organizing and occupying the BC Treaty Office that was selling Indigenous land and signing fake treaties. Young people went to go occupy those houses. It became national news. It became national news. This was like in the 90s. And it was those young people like that really said, hey, that's inspiring. My 15-year-old just, my 15-year-old cousin just did something very amazing for all of us Indigenous people. And it gave me the insight, it gave me the confidence to say, hey, we got to do the same thing and start educating yourself about rights, about human rights, about Indigenous rights, about water rights, because we all have rights, we all have human rights. And there's ways that we can help, other people right now, like the Palestinians. The Palestinians are standing up and, fighting for their lands right now. We need to stand behind them. There's so much movements around the world that people can be involved in that will get you educated so you can start doing your own stand, and so you could do your own stand and fight back. A mine in your backyard, someone's taking water, and there's so much things that we can be organizing around. And even just for students to come together and be together and to be able to communicate, because once you're out there, out of school and out in that world and everything, there's no organization happening amongst the people out there unless they're real activists. You have a chance right now to organize with so much different people with so much different skill sets. And who knows, one of you students might become a doctor, one might become, a teacher, one might become a birth worker. But you keep your contacts with each other, because all your guys' parents have lots of contacts. You can organize, you can mobilize. A lot of your parents have a lot of power too that you could influence. You could influence your parents, you could influence your adults in your life, because they're going to say, hey, what's this young person telling me? Oh, should that young person's actually saying something good, and take it and learn from you, because I learn from my kids every day. Don't think that you're not a teacher either, because we learn from our kids every day. So just that power is the youth. We need it. We need to see it. It's going to reinvigorate the world.
There's nothing like young energy, for sure. It's the most powerful thing on earth. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the trauma that you brought up, because I find that as human beings, as the earth is being destroyed and the ecology is going down, I find that a lot of people suffer not just environmental trauma, but they have their own traumas from their home. And it kind of, sometimes it stops people from mobilizing, it stops people from moving forward. It can also create unhealthy people. But then at the same time, when you can take that energy and you can use it for something good, and you can turn it into a passion, when you can flip that upside down and say, you know what, this wasn't right, but guess what? I'm going to take all of this ugly stuff and I'm going to create beautiful. I'm going to make something beautiful for my people. We're going to transform. We're going to, just absolutely be the catalyst of change that we need. Then I think that necessarily trauma is not a bad thing. I mean, if we already have it, then let's try to use it in a way that's constructive, for future generations. The next question I want to ask you, which I'm just dying to ask, is I know that you have such a beautiful way about you. You're very strong, but at the same time, it's not just with your words. You're very strong because you're showing people who you are through your tattooing and how that's connected to the earth. And you're representing yourself, not just spiritually, but physically to everything as an Indigenous woman, who you are to the earth. So what connections do you have with the traditional tattooing that you're known to do and advocate for? Like, you are definitely one of the pioneers for Indigenous tattooing. And a lot of people have so much respect for you in that regard. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the relationship that it has with the earth and being a land and water protector?
Yeah, when I was a young woman, my auntie, her name's Leanne, and she was always teaching me things. She always had books and archival information, and she said, "Hey, our women always had our face tattooed." She's like pulled out this old archival things, and she's like, "Look at this is how our women warriors wore our chin tattoos, and this is how they put tattoos on their wrists, and look at all this." And I was like, "What did you hear about it that?" And she's like, "Yeah, I remember Granny saying we had tattoo." And so I end up searching, not even searching, someone came in right in front of me and he was doing his master's thesis research on the correlation between traditional Indigenous tattooing and our basket making symbols and our rock painting symbols, our rocks that are painted with our petroglyphs and everything, and start looking at the symbols and of the interior tribes in so-called British Columbia. And so I dived right into it. We're painting a massive mural on the side of the Trans-Canada Highway, a big, huge billboard, and we wanted this female woman to wear her traditional tattoos. And so that was our first, way to put this big, massive image of this woman with her traditional tattoos right there so our whole community could see. So it became the buzz, and everyone in the community was talking about the traditional Indigenous tattooing. And I said, this man who gave the research, he's actually a tattoo artist. So I said, hey, give me my first hand poke tattoo. And he gave me my first hand poke tattoo at my mom's house there at Nisgalinth Indian Reserve, and gave me all of his research of all these symbols and the stories of it and the connection around the land. And all of the symbols were all land-based. They were like lake monsters and mountains and lakes. And, I have them right here, the arrows and rainbows and the earth lines and the porcupine. And all of them are based on the land, but they have stories and connections to the land and what connects us to the land. And, in order for us to be seen, by our spirits doing this work, because this is really, really selfless work that we do, putting a lot of our own personal everything aside just to do this for our land, for our people. And that's our life, and that's our love, that's our love. We feel fulfilled doing this. And so wearing these marks on my body and bringing these marks and these symbols back on my skin to be visible to my nation, to my people, to my Indigenous peoples of the world. They see me. There's no hiding who I am, with these marks. And it connects me so deep. They say, the spirits recognize you now, who you are. And the work that I do, I feel so protected. I felt like I put a powerful super armor on when I put these tattoos on. It's just so powerful. I can't even explain it. But I know that when I learned this tattooing so I could start to give these tattoos, it was to give it to my daughter when she came off her womanhood fast, and her ceremony was to give her first earth lines on her wrist, and she did. And she doesn't stop now. She's 18 years old and she wants more and more. And every time I connect back with my daughter, she wants more tattoos. So she knows she has stars and moons and, birds and everything, flowers from our wild flowers from our homelands that connect her to our territory. And I just see it. Every time I tattoo a face, I say, you're going to be a different person. It's going to change you. I don't know how to explain it fully, but people know what I mean when I say it. And Isaac, you too, because your face is tattooed.
Yes, absolutely. So I noticed that, I've always admired your tattoos. And for those of you out there, Kanahus actually tattooed me quite a bit. She's done a lot of my tattoos, and she still owes me one. Kanahus,
Yes.
you owe me a tattoo.
Yes.
Um, so I really love how you explain that the tattooings that you have represent your homelands, your earth, your family, and how it's all weaved in with the everything, and that's your identity, and it's such a beautiful thing. And I just want to commend you for doing such good work with not just tattooing but everything. So we know that right now, kids are excited about change. The kids know things are wrong. Kids know that you know that governments are failing all the time in the big picture when it comes to our environment. And oftentimes when government comes in, they really believe what they're saying, or we believe them, but it never really fully realizes. And that's why I always say that young people have the power to influence things and to change things when they gather and when they get into large numbers. And so I just want to go back to that young energy part again, because I think it's so critical for the survival of the planet. I think it'll be the young people that will save this world, that young energy. Um, so for example, right now you're down south. You're very ambitious. You have a lot of projects on the go. You're always networking. You're always coming up with these genius ideas all the time. What can young people do with their energy to help and to be a part of these movements that are happening? Because when you talked about diversity before, you talked about how pretty much how it takes a whole spectrum of people that are moving in the same direction with different ideas and thoughts and gifts to change things. And so we need that diversity to be able to change things. And right now, when you look at some of the major cities across Turtle Island, it's very diverse. Like there's people from all over the world. And so having this diverse, beautiful, gifted group of young people, you know, standing up for change and being able to mobilize and use their voice, I think is a very powerful thing. And so I guess my question that I have for you is how can they be a part of things that are already happening? How can they support? Because I believe that lots of trails have been left for them.
Yeah, I believe that young people have the power just to reach out either by social media and or email or finding contacts for people who they do want to work with. And just reach out and say, I'm a youth, I'm this years old, I want to help, I want to volunteer, I want to get educated. This is a higher education. This is like a higher type of learning. I had to do it myself. I had to reach out to PhD economists. I had to reach out to doctorates in law, constitutional lawyer, different people that I would never be friends with, and make them my friends. Make them my friends and find out what we have in common so we could continue to learn from each other to heighten, heighten our education level so we can think. And one thing that I always say is like, well, as young people, you're learning where your place is, where your skill, but you know that there's something that you love. There's something that you love to do. And that skill set can fit in this bigger picture of organizing, whatever it may be. Maybe you love poetry, well, then let's help write a poem for the world that's going to change the world, that's going to make people happy or elevate their mind or make them want to stand up and fight back. Or there's everyone has a skill set. Maybe you just love to go mountain biking or biking and cycling. Well, there's something you can do. You can do like, we're cycling to freedom and we're bringing attention to this issue. So there's so much places that everybody could fit in. And really having the confidence, having the confidence is so powerful. As young people, can't have your head down. No, put your head up. You are the power. You're the youthfulness. Everyone wants to be young again. We all want to be young again. And we wish we would have done things different and better and stronger and used our youthful body to do, so much more. And I'm always available to be a mentor to a young person because I believe so much, like Isaac says, that it's going to be our young people that create change. So I got contacted by so much youth that want to do reports and for their school, and I have no problem continuing to mentor and have connection with youth that want to do work.
I think that's amazing. So I think right now I just want to ask the kids. There's lots and lots of kids watching this. There's thousands and thousands, so we can't, of course, have all of them ask questions, but let's see if we can get a couple of questions through. So at this time, I'll ask Jody if she can facilitate that and ask Kanahus questions because she's right here. She's amazing. She's beautiful. And she's really, really smart. And it's not every day we get this opportunity. So Jody, if there's any questions from the kids, let's filter them through. And let's ask our distinguished guest of honor and our good friend Kanahus some real deadly questions.
Okay, so so here some questions have come in. And just a reminder for those who are watching, you can use the link in the description box below to complete the form and put a question forward. Question here is, and I feel like you probably have answered this already, but maybe if you want to elaborate on it, is what does survivance mean to you?
Survivance?
Mm-hmm.
Survivance. I have to ask my dictionary what that means. But to survive, to like, I don't know that word. You guys are more educated on this vocabulary than me, so
I'm gonna interpret it as maybe we could reframe the question as to what has been like a real standout moment for you in your work to maintain your sovereignty, to maintain your life on the land despite everything happening with industry around you.
okay. Yeah, I met this elder. His name is Coyote. He's from Round Valley, California. He had sons that were a part of the Native Youth Movement that were occupying and blockading and doing direct actions with us. And he says, you know, you could go around and you could be doing these things for 10 more years, and then you're going to still just be going around talking about these things, or else you could spend these next 10 years raising your children doing it, actually living it, living in your traditional underground kukuli pit house, birthing your babies out there without a doctor, only eating traditional foods and sustaining the way of our ancestors, to show that we can do it, to show my kids we can do it. And it was really, that was my sort of wake up call to say, hey, I got to stop talking about it and just do it and just be it, because that's how I'm going to make more impact on and influence the people in my nation to want to do something, is by saying, hey, we know this woman, she lived in an underground pit house, she birthed all of her babies on the land, she just eats traditional foods, she cans and smokes all of her moose meat, and she doesn't use a deep freeze, she doesn't have electricity, she lives on a dirt floor, you know. And I raised all my children like that, and lived like that. And that's actually living and breathing it is what, you know, helped and made everything, you know, happen, is just living and breathing and doing it. And I think that's why there's so much people in my nation that, you know, recognize that work, because it's not easy. It's not easy. You're melting snow water, you're hiking through massive snow blizzards with your baby on your back and things like that. So, you know, it was for my own self too, to show my own self I can do it, that we don't need, you know, the outside world to survive.
Yeah, I know that teaching of, you know, doing it is so much stronger than fighting against something. And of course we've both done our fair share of fighting, and we've both done it together. But there's something about when you're actually doing it, you know, with your kids on the land, that makes it everything worthwhile. Next question. Let's try to get another question through.
Okay, so I guess maybe building on what you've talked about so far with education is, can you talk a little bit more or maybe provide some more details around when you talk about your educational institution? So the question is, what does your educational institution look like? Because you mentioned it.
Well, right now, our educational institution is all land-based. The way that I raised my children was through a program and a curriculum that we developed as parents. There's around 5 or 6 groups, or 6, maybe probably 6 or 7 groups of parents with children that chose to raise our children out of the school system and instead participate in this land-based training. And so all these kids, they get together 4 times a year, every season, to do something together, whether it's building bentwood boxes or hunting. Like, they just got back from a big hunting trip where, you know, my daughter got her second deer. There's other young people that got their their first deer or moose. Those are the type of educational and sort of in ways of teaching my children, but in dreams of a future of having a more structured educational institution, where a formal education where we could have some higher learning around Indigenous governance, politics, and law, where we could have Indigenous peoples or anybody actually come into these institutions. It would be good to have like a Indigenous economics and trade school that talks about Indigenous economies and actually how to build that. We have Native billionaires in Canada that could mentor and assist in teaching students. So it's a dream right now of how we would form a more formal institution, Indigenous institution that's really formed off of how we want to teach everybody. But I know that a lot is land-based. Like, we can't just have a structure and think that we're going to do all of our teaching inside. A lot of our education is land-based, and our language is a big part of that, because without language, we lose some key components of our teachings. For example, my mother talks about our language, because I don't speak fluent our language, but my mom would talk about, oh, we don't have she or he in our language. We don't have that. We don't have feminine and masculine in our language when we refer to different objects or things. She would say it's impossible in our language to talk about somebody if they're not there. So there's different things and teachings in our language that really form who we are, that really we can't really be who we are without, speaking in our own language. And so these formal institutions need to include language, and language needs to be one of the biggest pushes right now in this big healing funds that are coming out by the Canadian government due to the residential school genocide. What I would propose is, instead of giving Indigenous people social assistance on the reserve because there's no employment, actually let's cut that all out and let's give us a livable stipend for every Indigenous person in Canada to go full time in learning language. And that would be our job. Those are the types of things we need.
I love that. Sometimes late at night, I'll talk to your mom, and your mom and we talk about language a lot and the language revitalization. And so I just want to thank you for bringing that up, because that's an important part of all of this, is because Indigenous languages hold the ancient code on how to live here. And your mother's always saying that if we want to learn how to live here, we have to know our languages. That's because that's how we're going to learn. And so I just want to thank you for bringing that up. And I also want to thank you for joining us, because you brought a certain magic and a certain wealth of higher education thought. Is very thought-provoking. A lot of our minds exploded, because a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is not only true, but we feel it and know it is true. And so you're a real person. Like, you're real, authentic and true and real. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. You're just a treasure to the earth. You're precious, and we thank you so much for joining us. And do you have any last words before we head out?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, and to all the students and all the young people out there. I believe in you. I believe that you have the power, and I thank you, Isaac, for inviting me here. It's always just so refreshing to hear you too, and just to have the opportunity to talk to some young people, which is so inspiring for myself as well.
Oh, no, how and get you in dam on P. We can on and gook 1 o'clock. So we will see everybody again. We're going to do another one at 1 o'clock. But for those that have watched here now, thank you for joining us. Thanks for being a part of this conversation. And remember, take what you've learned here and start to create dialogue, start to create conversations. Speak to your teacher, speak to your principal, speak to the janitor, speak to everybody and anybody that's interested in change, and start mobilizing, because you know what? You can do it, and it's time. So miigwech, and we will talk to you soon. Bama pig wabnanem naho. Miwe.